his commitment to a world beyond him?
Well, he was a very private individual in a lot of ways, so I don't necessarily have anything to volunteer right now, but I think over time it'll become more and more clear, you know, what an amazing contribution to humanity he made, in addition to the contributions he made to the industry and to the technology world.
Someone once told me, and I don't know if it's true, but I think that Steve never went to China. I mean, this place that sort of is having such a huge impact, that his passion, and this may have been because of illness, but that his passion was home and family and going to Apple to work and to get things done. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's right. In fact, you could those of us who live in and around Palo Alto, you could often see Steve, you know, walking around. He'd stop by the Apple store in Palo Alto and talk to the customers. You know, he was, you know, legendary, obviously, for his work ethic. He spent a tremendous amount of time, you know, building Apple. He spent a tremendous amount of time working on Apple, you know, and for Apple, even in the time when he was unable to be there in person every day. And then, yes, he, you know, was incredibly committed to family, and you know, has an absolutely wonderful family and wife and 3 kids, and then, you know, a daughter from you know, from his previous relationship, and you know, they're, who are in their own right just amazing people, and that was, you know, the most, I think, you know, family ultimately was, as you'd expect, the most important thing in the world to him.
He would get out and at Stanford in and around the community and have dinner with friends and come to your house and other places? I drive up and down Embarcadero Road in Palo Alto, you know, all the time, going back and forth and things. And one time I'm, you know, booking in my car down Embarcadero, and I go by, you know, this guy, and I just see out of the corner of my eye, you know, right ready to cross the street, you know, black turtleneck jeans, and I'm like, oh my God, I almost hit Steve Jobs. You know, not uncommon for people in and around Palo Alto to see him walking around like that. Yeah. Eric, the question will be raised, what happens to Apple after Steve Jobs? Eric?
Tim was operating president when I was on the board, and Tim is a very, very capable executive. As you know, he's now CEO. So I think the gifts that Steve has given us will continue for many, many years. The great thing about Apple is that the executives are there, they're not going anywhere, and they've got a very good forward story. So for all of you and all of us who are fans of Apple products, I think they'll continue to come and they'll do very well. The economic engine that Steve built is an amazing one in terms of cash generation, revenue growth, global footprint, distribution. You know, it's just a great business. One of the great American success stories as a person, but also as a company.
There's also the legendary competitiveness that he had. So you're at Google, and you're the one-time CEO at the time, I think, that you were sitting on the Apple board, and then chairman of Google. And all of a sudden, you have to leave the board because you're going to be in a competitive business. How did that sit with Steve?
Well, as part of my joining the board, we understood that Apple and Google were going to be companies that were going to both partner and compete. And we agreed that if it became more compete than partner, it was the right thing to do to split up. So it was all actually very cordial, and Steve and I were and remain good friends, and I have just extraordinary respect for his leadership. So on a personal basis, it was fine, and I think it was the right thing to be part of Apple. It was also the right thing to leave the board when we did.
Did you ever see him angry?
Oh yes, Steve is a man of great passion, and he took a very
You're smiling.
Yeah. He took a very strong position about what he wanted, how he wanted, and he was very strong advocate for his company. So if you're on the other side of a deal with Steve, you're going to have a pretty tough negotiation, which is to his credit. He did a very good job for his shareholders.
Mark, you ever see him angry?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, Steve, I often talk out in California. I use this phrase a lot: California casual, which is, or California fake casual, which is a lot of people in California, you know, want to go along, get along, and everybody's nice to each other and smiles to each other's faces. And then when, you know, somebody leaves the room, they're like, oh, that guy's, you know, a real son of a, you know, whatever. Steve's not like that. Steve was never like that. Steve was always somebody who would tell you exactly where you stood. He would tell you exactly what he thought, and so the clarity of the communication that you could have with him, there was, you know, no wasted time. There was no wasted effort. Everything was crystal clear and unbelievably effective. And I think that quality permeates all of Apple's culture, and is one of the reasons that they're such an amazing company.
No, but if you look at Steve's ability to negotiate, and the fact that he was able to get the historic deals he did with the music industry at a time when it was impossible, that showed you his ability to negotiate deals. Very clever, very aggressive for the positions that he wanted, and he typically got them.
Yeah, interesting about that Eric, is that there was great conflict between Steve and Michael Eisner when Michael was the CEO of Disney, and they couldn't decide on a number of things, including Pixar. And then when Bob Iger came in, I think he cultivated Steve, and they were able to make a deal.
Right. You know, Steve had strong opinions about the structure of the industry, but if you look at, for example, the original music deals that he did, they really defined a platform of monetization for music that people had been looking for years, and yet he literally pushed it himself. He said, there will be a platform, this is, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, there will be a platform, it will have this pricing, you will like it, we will make it happen. So he used very, very clever negotiating skills to establish a platform that millions of people use today, and has served as a basis for monetization for content for many years in the future, I think.
There is also this, Mark, his relationship to Bill Gates. Bill Gates was, they even made a movie about the two of them. Bill Gates was coming along when Steve originally was in the computer business with Wozniak and developing the first Apple, and Bill Gates was developing Microsoft and software. What was that? Can you give us some sense of a historical perspective on that relationship?
Yeah, I think that Steve and Bill Gates and Andy Grove, I think if you had to pick 3 people, are the people who really built the personal computer industry, you know, over the last 30, 35 years.
Right. And Wintel and the rest.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, I think in retrospect, I think the way it will be described is that they drove each other to greatness. And so, you know, there were points in time when one of them or another had the jump strategically or had, you know, the bigger market valuation or the bigger revenue. You know, but all 3 would continuously drive each other to greater and greater heights. And you know, I think that Apple was an inspiration to Microsoft for many years in terms of the products, and you know, there were, you know, over time there were various resemblances. And then you know, when Microsoft was very successful as a business and very successful with their products, you know, when Steve came back to Apple, I think it was, you know, I think Steve was determined to make sure that Apple would be able to you know, be a very successful company, and whether at the time was a Microsoft, you know, dominated world, and of course did an amazing job doing that to the point where Apple is now worth, you know, I think what, double maybe what Microsoft is. And so the result has been just an enormous amount of positive development for the world, for the economy, and for the industry. The products that were created through that kind of 2-way or 3-way dynamic have powered the industry and made all the other amazing things in the industry possible.
What's even more...
We're joined now. Go ahead, Eric. Yeah,
if you go back and look at the press in 1994 and 1995, Apple had been completely written off, was allegedly near bankruptcy. When Steve came in, imagine fighting against those odds as an executive, as a leader, as a person, and look at what he achieved in that period.